Firefighters are simply doing everything they can just to try and contain this fire.
The news never stops.
Take a look at this car over here. The driver just literally gave up.
And neither does Susan Schiller.
Susan is like the James Brown of broadcasting. She's the hardest working woman in the news business.
A Philly girl, Susan grew up on the boulevard and fell in love with news early on.
KYW News Radio.
It happened at KYW News Studies during her senior year at Little Flower Catholic High School for Girls. So she got right to work doing radio at Lindenwood University in Missouri. In nearby St. Louis, Susan landed an internship at KMOX-TV, which led to a writer's job and a promotion to producer. But it wasn't long before Susan came back to Philadelphia to work at WCAU.
I knew her most as the disembodied voice at the other end of the two-way radio.
After another stint in St. Louis, it was off to CBS News Path before heading back to WCAU as assistant news director, and then CBS News.
From CBS News in New York, this is CBS This Morning.
Working 8 years as a senior producer of CBS This Morning and another 4 at the Evening News, covering everything from political conventions to a U.S. visit of Pope John Paul II.
Susan is the most wonderful combination of aggressive, hard-bitten, hard-driven news producer who's going to get it done and run through a brick wall on fire to make sure the story ends up hers.
She oversaw a unit dealing with medical stories and worked on the prestigious Eye on America series. She did feature stories as well, cooking with Julia Child, and even went to the Olympics, braving the cold in Norway and, again, 4 years later in Japan. But in 2001, it was time to come home to Philadelphia. As Vice President of News for CBS 3 and the CW Philly, Susan has overseen the coverage of many major stories, winning numerous Emmys and 2 National Edward R. Murrow Awards.
It is a sea of pink.
She has also been instrumental in many of the station's campaigns, like Race for the Cure and Alex's Lemonade Stand.
She's without a doubt dedicated to her job and committed to growing the people who she works with.
41 years later, Susan is back at News Studies as well, helping a new generation of journalists. And as always, working on the next newscast. Her office rarely dark, even late into the night.
Susan is a great newswoman with a ton of tenacity and a ton of heart. One of those people I'm really proud to say that I've worked with.
Susan, congratulations on your selection to the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame.
I can't tell you how wonderful it was to be able to spend part of my career working with her. I always felt I was with one of the world's most empathic, caring people.
I cannot believe that I'm standing here in front of all of you tonight. I have to say that when Tom and Terry talked at the beginning about if we kept this going, we might be here through Sunday. But when I started sort of thinking about everybody in the room here who has been instrumental in my career and helped me along the way and has been a friend and a colleague and an advocate and just those late night talks about everything related to what we do for our work, we would have been here till Tuesday. So I apologize for all of that I cannot name everybody individually. But I want you to know that I am just so proud. I feel like in my wildest dreams, I could never have imagined that a girl from Little Flower Catholic High School would be standing here and honored by the broadcast pioneers just because she had an aspiration to work in television. I have to tell you a little bit about how I got here, and I know there are so many students here that I want to share with you and with them a little bit about kind of how I got to be here. When I was in grade school, I realized that I was kind of a night person, and I guess that's pretty evident from the tape because I'm still at it. I'm still like up at night late, and I would sit on the top step of my parents' row home. and I'd be out of their sight. But I'd be listening to, as my mom and dad, Joe and Pat Schiller, were watching the talk shows late at night. And one of their particular favorites was Dick Cavett. And he was just a phenomenal interviewer. And I didn't really understand every answer because I was a kid. But I was fascinated by the way he got to ask the questions. And the people would talk to him and they'd answer him. And I was just really wanted to kind of get to know more about that. So by the time I was in high school, I was just absolutely hooked. Local news, network news, it was streaming into our home. My parents were they were equal opportunity news watchers. They watched 6, they watched 3, they watched 10, they watched everybody. And they liked all the networks they watched. So we were just sort of a news family, soaked it in. And I really discovered that by the time I was in high school, after, watching stories about Vietnam, civil rights, all that jazz, I was hooked. I wound up applying to Temple, and I really thought I'd wind up there, but I decided that I really wanted to sort of see what else was out there. And I'll never forget that my parents took me on that college tour, that so many of you do, and I wound up, talk about weather, I wind up in the Midwest, and I'm crossing the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, and it is the Great Flood. It is sandbags everywhere, there's sand, there's National Guard, there's all this stuff, it's the weather. And I'd never seen anything like it. And I said to myself, I guess I have to go west because I just had to see something different and something new. It was something I hadn't experienced growing up in the city here. So honestly, for a girl from Philly to go to Missouri, I felt like a pioneer back then already. And I was really determined to go. But my father was on the boulevard packing up the car. And my mother said, Susan, sit down a minute, will you? I said, okay, Mom, we got to go. We got to get to the airport. She's like, just 5 minutes. Okay. She said, honey, are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to be a librarian? Something that you can do and be at home in the summers when you finally have kids? Anybody who knows me knows that being a librarian, a quiet library, is really not all about, what I am. So I said, Mom, I'm pretty determined to go. I'm going to go. And she said, well, if you're going to go do it, do you want to be on the air? Do you want to be an anchor? And I had never wanted to do anything but be behind the scenes. I love finding and crafting great stories and telling them, and I just love working with anchors and reporters to put on a really good newscast. And I love the control room. And in fact, when I met my husband, John, I dragged him into the control room to let him see how I work. And I actually think that Anthony Mason was at the other end of that two-way that day, and he was late feeding in a story. He was the Jersey reporter, and I was like, Anthony, come on. And, John got to see all that and walked out of that control room and was like, man, you're tough. I am so lucky that he decided to ask me to marry him anyway. That's all I could tell you. He got a good look at me that day. And I just want to say that without your love and support, honey, I would not be standing here today. My kids, I have 2 amazing kids. My son, Paul, the day he left college is the next day he joined the Marines, and he's now serving with the military. And my daughter, Elena, Tom, very proud of him. And my daughter Elena's in Boston in school. And I was a mom that wasn't always able to be there for every field trip or soccer game. Again, my husband John, great coached both kids' teams. But I thought to myself, well, your mom, that you're working a lot and you're not here. But one thing that I always sort of hoped that they would see through my work, that you can love what you do and that you can really develop a passion for what you do. So just a couple of other people that I want to thank here. My family's here today. I have 2 great sisters, Janine and Leanne, and my brother-in-law, Jim. And Leanne, I want to thank you again for having another holiday meal that I really am not contributing to help with. And my friends are here, and my CBS family is here, and I cannot say enough wonderful things. I've had some amazing opportunities back and forth across the network, and I've worked with so many talented people. Jerika Duncan up in Buffalo yesterday doing a lead story on the CBS Evening News several nights in a row. And I know you know Bob Orr's work and Anthony Mason. Jim Axelrod is also a Philly guy, went to Germantown Academy. So they're really special to see that there. So how did I wind up from there back here? Well, I walked through the newsroom one day in New York and somebody said, hey, the news director job is open, why don't you go for it? And I loved my job in New York. It was great as a producer. It was just unbelievably fabulous. And I came home and I told my husband that I had an offer to come here, and he said to me, you know, you've always said, ever since I've known you, that the one thing that you would love to achieve is to be the news director in your hometown. And a colleague of mine said to me, you know, it's your chance to grab your brass ring. And I never really forgot that. I started here just a few days before 9/11. It was really a difficult time. My kids were new in school. My husband had left for New York that day. He had meetings very close to the World Trade Center, and I didn't know where he was. But a lot changed for us that day. And we all got through it together. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who was here. My general manager, John Hitchcock, I know that you have been, you're my boss, but I think of you as my partner. And you've allowed us to just do wonderful work as broadcast professionals in our city. I am grateful for the team that I work with every day. Rich Edwards, John Wilson, they put that tape together for me. My assistant news director, executive producer, fabulous team. Sarah Brzezinski, our creative services director, Walt Hunter, and Yuki Washington, thank you for the tape. And who am I leaving out? Charlene Horn, our editing supervisor. And I don't think I missed anybody. I hope not. Anyway, Beasley Reese, and I mentioned Yuki. So as you can tell, I'm not really used to being in front of the limelight. I'm not somebody who easily ad-libs on the air. But I just want to say that I think that it's an amazing business we're in. Everything we do has an immediacy of information that is special, and I think our industry is just going through an exciting time, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. Lots of times, students come in, people come in, ask for interviews, and they say, well, what do you, as a news director, what does it take to make it? And I pretty much always say the same thing: passion, perseverance, and curiosity. For me, it's a privilege beyond measure to have done this. And I want to congratulate all the inductees into the Broadcast Hall of Fame. I am really humbled by this honor. And I hope you'll forgive me for not being much of a joke teller, but for me tonight, this is so special, and I cannot begin to express my thanks and appreciation to all of you who have made my career here in Philadelphia so ultimately special. Thank you.